He wasn't a president. He wasn't a spy. He was just a teenage boy dancing with a girl named Elena in a dim Soviet apartment. The year? 1970. And the young man in this photo? Vladimir Putin, years before the world would know his name. There's something haunting about this moment. The soft smile, the awkward charm, the normalcy. Because behind those youthful eyes was a future shaped by power, control, and fear. At this moment, he could have chosen any path: teacher, soldier, engineer. But the Cold War was still burning. And in the shadows, the KGB was watching. Just two teenagers dancing. Yet history stood silently in the corner. This photo captures a rare innocence, one that would soon vanish. Who could have known that this quiet boy would one day become one of the most controversial figures of the 21st century? History doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers in black and white. At first glance, it's just two construction workers posing for a photo. But look closer. Behind them, the North Tower burns. The South Tower still stands untouched. The time? Just minutes before the second plane struck. September 11th, 2001. Caught in an instant when the world still thought it was just a terrible accident. These men, smiling, unaware. No sirens. No screams. Not yet. This photo froze the final breath of normalcy before history shattered. They weren't taking a selfie in tragedy. They were living in a moment that hadn't fully revealed its horror. In just seconds, the second impact would change everything. America would change. The world would change. But in this quiet second, time stood still. It's not just a strange photo. It's a ghost. A reminder of how fast peace can become chaos, and how none of us ever know when a moment becomes history. He looks calm, almost defiant. But this isn't just any man in handcuffs. This is Lee Harvey Oswald, moments before the world would know his name. November 1963. President John F. Kennedy had just been assassinated. America was in shock. And here stood the man accused of pulling the trigger. But in this exact moment, Oswald said something chilling. "I'm just a patsy." That single phrase lit the fuse for decades of conspiracy theories, cover-ups, and unanswered questions. Was he truly the lone gunman, or just a pawn in a darker game? Hours after this photo was taken, he'd be silenced forever, shot live on television by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. Justice died with him, and so did the chance for truth. This isn't just a mugshot. It's the face of a mystery that still haunts America. A man, a murder, a moment frozen just before history spiraled into darkness. This isn't fiction. This is history, ugly, raw, and real. A sign from Apartheid-era Johannesburg, South Africa. It reads like a threat from a dystopian novel: natives, Indians, and coloreds. If you enter these premises at night, you will be listed as missing. Armed guards shoot on sight. Savage dogs devour the corpse. This was the law. This was normal. And this was how a government kept power, through fear, brutality, and dehumanization. For decades, the apartheid regime built walls with bullets and signs like this, making sure black South Africans and people of color knew exactly where they didn't belong. This isn't just a warning, it's a monument to hate. But it also serves another purpose now: a reminder. A reminder of what silence allows. A reminder of why history matters. Because if we don't remember, we risk repeating. And this sign, as horrific as it is, demands that we never forget what it stood for. They look like just three ordinary kids on a summer day, smiling, relaxed, unaware. But one of them would go on to reshape the modern world. The boy in the red shirt? Elon Musk, just 17, long before Tesla, SpaceX, or billion-dollar headlines. With him are his younger siblings, Kimball and Tosca. The year is 1989. The place, apartheid-era South Africa, a country on the edge of transformation, and so was he. No one could have guessed that this teenager, awkward, brilliant, bullied, would one day launch rockets, defy industries, and become one of the most talked-about figures of the 21st century. In this moment, there were no algorithms, No Twitter, no Mars. Just family, just possibility. This photo doesn't show a tech mogul. It shows the beginning of a story that's still being written. Because every visionary once stood in the shade of youth, waiting for the world to catch up. This isn't a queen. Not yet. But she's about to become one. Not just in the play, but on the world stage. This is Helen Mirren in 1965, playing Cleopatra in Antony and Cleopatra. Barely 20 years old. Fierce. Unapologetic. And already radiating a power that couldn't be taught. She wasn't royalty, but she wore it. With that stare, that posture, that quiet fire. Long before the Oscars, long before the Queen, this was the beginning. Raw, theatrical, electric. On this set, she was a rising storm in British theater. And no one watching then could have guessed that this woman would one day become one of the most respected, decorated actresses in history. But here you see it. The command, the presence. The transformation of Helen into Cleopatra wasn't just acting. It was destiny. Because some roles are played, others are lived. She looks like everyone's favorite grandmother, sweet, smiling, harmless. But behind that grin was a trail of death. This is Nanny Doss, and between the 1920s and 1950s, she murdered at least 11 members of her own family. For husbands, 2 children, 2 sisters, her mother, 2 grandsons, even a mother-in-law. Her motive? Insurance money, and maybe something darker. But the most chilling part? She laughed, nonstop. During her confession, she giggled like it was all a joke. The press called her the giggling granny. America had never seen anything like it. A killer in curlers, baking pies, reading romance novels, and poisoning anyone who got too close. This photo wasn't taken at a family reunion. It was taken at court. And that smile? It wasn't innocence, it was pride. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She just laughed. Because for Nanny Doss, murder wasn't a crime. It was a lifestyle. And everyone was on the menu. She's holding a mirror, but what was she really trying to see? This is Marilyn Monroe, 1962, getting her hair done by Agnes Flanagan, one of the few people who saw her not as an icon, but as a woman. No lights, no red carpet, just quiet prep in a quiet room. That year would be her last. Just weeks after this photo, Marilyn would be gone, and the world would be left with questions, rumors, and heartbreak. But here, in this frozen moment, there's still time, still hope. Her smile isn't fake, it's tired. Her posture isn't glamorous, it's real. Behind the Hollywood image was a fragile soul, craving control over a life the world had already taken. This wasn't a photo shoot. It was a pause, a breath, a glimpse of Norma Jean before Marilyn faded into myth. Because even legends need a moment to just be human. Dangling hundreds of feet above icy waters, these men weren't just building a bridge, they were building a miracle. The Golden Gate Bridge, 1930s. With roaring winds, swaying steel, and death just one misstep away, it was called the suicide job. But Joseph Strauss, the lead structural engineer, did something radical. He ordered a safety net, a $130,000 expense at the time, over $2.7 million today. People called it wasteful. He called it necessary. And they were wrong. That net saved 19 lives. 19 fathers, sons, brothers, caught by something they didn't think would be there. They became known as the Halfway to Hell Club. This photo captures more than a construction site. It captures foresight, courage, and the value of a single life. Sometimes, greatness isn't just in what you build, it's in who you choose to protect while building it. There's no courtroom, no trial, just silence and a circle of rifles. This man, eyes unblinking, jaw clenched, stands alone, moments from death. He was branded a traitor by the Mujahideen. His crime? Unknown. Maybe collaboration, maybe betrayal, or maybe just fear in the wrong place at the wrong time. But here, in the unforgiving landscape of wartime Afghanistan, mercy was a luxury no one could afford. The men surrounding him don't flinch. Their weapons are steady, their faces unreadable. This photo doesn't show violence. It shows the second before it, the breath between judgment and execution. And in that second, a man stands, not begging, not fleeing, just waiting. History often forgets faces like his, but this image refuses to look away. It's a portrait of war without the explosions, just consequence. Cold, brutal, final, because sometimes the loudest screams are found in the quiet just before the trigger is pulled. He's not just carrying a bomb, he's carrying death on his shoulder like it's just another tool of the trade. This photo, taken in 1942, shows a Soviet airman hauling a FAB-50 bomb by hand. No forklift, no protective suit, just frostbitten ground, thin gloves, and the weight of war pressing down on his spine. The Eastern Front was a meat grinder, and Soviet pilots didn't have the luxury of fear. They loaded their own bombs, flew in open cockpits, faced near-certain death with every takeoff, and still they did it. This image doesn't show heroism in Hollywood terms. No slow motion, no fanfare, just a man and the explosive silence of war. He walks with calm, not because he feels safe, but because survival depends on not thinking about what happens if he trips. This is World War II, not in glory, but in grit. And every step he takes is a gamble with fate. No gold, no glamour, just a girl, her cat, and a pot barely simmering on the stove. San Antonio, Texas, 1939. America was still clawing its way out of the Great Depression, and this kitchen tells you everything you need to know. A box for a chair, torn socks drying on the wall, a dented stove offering more warmth than food. But look at her face, calm, thoughtful, strong. She's not posing. She's enduring. Childhood, here, didn't come with toys or laughter. It came with silence, with survival. And yet, there's life. A cat brushing against her leg, a flicker of heat, a moment of stillness in a world that gave her little. This photo doesn't just capture poverty, it captures resilience. It reminds us that behind every statistic, behind every struggle, there's a story. A girl, a name we'll never know. But in this frame, she's not forgotten. She's history, and she's human. May 5th, 1980. A moving truck waits outside a modest apartment in Queens. Inside, Mary Fillon, 74 years old, half paralyzed, and recovering from a stroke. For over 30 years, this had been her home, until that day. She opened the door to find city marshals and Trump's men clearing her life into boxes. Chairs, dishes, photos, gone. Her rent? Just $99. Trump's reason? Profit. The building now belonged to his empire, and Mary was an inconvenience. When reporters asked why, his office said, "The Trumps don't get involved in individual cases." Mary was rolled into Parsons Hospital, confused, humiliated. Another casualty of power versus people. This wasn't a scandal splashed on cable news. It was a quiet cruelty buried in a local column. But this photo, it speaks louder than any headline. It shows what happens when the vulnerable meet the unstoppable force of money. One woman, one bed, one empire, and the cost of indifference. This photo captured a miracle and a nightmare. The wreckage belongs to Flight 571, a chartered plane carrying a Uruguayan rugby team that crashed in the Andes on October 13, 1972. The temperature? Sub-zero. The terrain? Ruthless. The food? Gone in days. But the survivors refused to die. For 72 days, they faced avalanches, starvation, and the unthinkable, eating the bodies of the dead to stay alive. The world thought they were gone, until two of them hiked for 10 days across deadly mountains to bring help. When rescuers finally arrived, they didn't just find survivors, they found legends. This photo shows the moment hope returned. 16 men waving their arms in the snow after 2 months in hell. Not just a survival story, a story of what human beings will do to hold on to life. Because when the world gave up, they didn't. This isn't just history. It's a testament to the will to live. Before she became a television icon, she was just a 19-year-old with a dream. December 1941, Betty White was trying to break into Hollywood, one audition at a time. But everything changed the day Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. As war exploded across the Pacific, Betty made a choice that defined her character long before fame ever would. She put her rising career on pause and joined the American Women's Voluntary Services. Instead of scripts and cameras, her days were filled with bandages, supply drives, and organizing support for soldiers overseas. She drove military supply trucks, handed out meals, and lifted morale, not with punchlines, but with purpose. In a time of fear and sacrifice, she showed the world what real star power looked like. Long before laughter made her a legend, courage made her unforgettable. This isn't just the story of a beloved actress. It's the story of a patriot who answered the call before the spotlight ever did. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, but this was real. Los Angeles, 1948. Welcome to the Motormat Drive-In. No roller skating waitresses. No car hops yelling orders. Just rails, gears, and pure mid-century innovation. Invented by Kenneth C. Purdy, this futuristic drive-in delivered meals on sliding trays that glided straight to your car window, like a conveyor belt of burgers and milkshakes. The striped awnings added charm, but the real magic was mechanical. In a time when America was dreaming of robots and space travel, even lunch got a makeover. Each parking space was its own mini station, with food arriving faster than you could light a cigarette. It was the Jetsons before the Jetsons. The Motormat didn't last forever, but it proved something. Even everyday routines, like grabbing a burger, could be reimagined with creativity and ambition. This wasn't just fast food. It was the future, served on rails. She stands with quiet strength. He sits with silent weight. Mother and son, Ireland, 1890. Her hands grip a cane worn smooth by years. His fingers clutch a folded paper, perhaps a letter, a pension, or the memory of something long gone. Look closer. Her eyes have seen famine. His beard has grown through storms. Together, they wear the century in their skin, in the folds of fabric, in shoes patched and repatched. This isn't just poverty, it's perseverance. A mother who outlived her own time. A son who stayed, who didn't leave for America, who didn't chase fortune across oceans. He stayed for her, and she held on for him. In an Ireland torn by hunger, exile, and silence, this portrait whispers something sacred, love that asks for nothing, yet gives everything. No crowns, no history books, just two souls surviving side by side. Not royalty, not rebels, just family. And sometimes, that's the most powerful legacy of all. This is not just a hunting party. It's a portrait of survival, heritage, and quiet resistance. Taiwan, 1939. These are Seziat hunters, one of the island's indigenous peoples, standing proud with their Formosan mountain dogs, loyal companions bred for endurance, stealth, and loyalty. Behind them, traditional homes. Around them, a jungle rich with stories. But above them, colonial rule. Japan had occupied Taiwan since 1895, and though modern systems were imposed, the forests remained sacred. Here, the Seziat clung to their identity, in their tools, their rituals, their unity. Each scar told a story, each dog a protector. They hunted not just for food, but for continuity, for culture, for defiance. This photo freezes a moment when indigenous strength stood face to face with foreign power, not in protest, but in presence. And that's what makes it powerful. In a century of upheaval, these men remained rooted. Because before borders and empires, there were people. And they remembered who they were. In the quiet hills of early 20th century Palestine, a man performs a ritual older than empires. A shepherd pouring oil on the head of a sheep, not for ceremony, not for show, but for protection against parasites, against wounds, against the cruel sun. This wasn't just tradition, it was love in motion, a silent language between guardian and flock. Every drop was care, every gesture, ancient wisdom passed down through generations. Long before borders divided the land, before headlines and headlines tried to define it, there were shepherds. There were olive trees. There was rhythm in the soil. This photo doesn't shout. It whispers. It reminds us that the most sacred acts often go unseen, between man and land, between protector and the voiceless. In a world obsessed with power, here's a moment of peace. Simple, humble, eternal. Because before history was written in ink, it was written in footsteps, oil, and wool.